Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Greetings. We are very, very excited to have you today in this new addition to the Center for Applied Cybersecurity Research Speaker Series that's being co-sponsored today by the Kelley School of Business. And we are thrilled to be joined by the Dean of the Kelley School of Business, Eli Kessner, to provide some opening remarks before we turn things over to our distinguished speaker for today, Meredith Harper, the Vice President and CISO from Eli Lilly, which is going to be a fantastic fireside type discussion. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities for questions. So you can start thinking about those now. But first, we'll turn things over to Eli. And Dean Kessner was appointed Dean of the Kelley School back in 2013. She's also the Frank P. Popoff Chair of Strategic Management. Joining Kelley in 1995, she's held a wide array of leadership roles at the school over the years. Her research focuses on corporate boards, executive succession, and M&A. She's taught more than 100 executive education classes and consulted many national and international firms on board-related issues. She currently serves on 5 boards and has won dozens of teaching awards over the years, and was named in 2019 as the Business School Dean of the Year by Poets and Quants, a leading business school media outlet. So Eli, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, welcome any welcoming remarks you might have.
Thank you, Scott. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I want to echo Scott's welcome. It's so exciting to see you here. This is a great speaker series, and today's topic is particularly timely and important. The political and social climate these last few years, along with the disparities exposed during the pandemic, have revealed just how important it is to intentionally foster diversity, equity, and inclusion, not just in education, but also in communities, in government, in the technology industry, in the healthcare industry, and in business overall. Of course, business is all about relationships. It's about rolling up your sleeves and solving problems together. It's about working as a team, using the best traits of your teammates or colleagues to find the best solutions. It's about embracing diversity of gender and ethnicity, thought and experience to learn from each other, how to make better solutions, how to do things, not just for your company, but for the broad community as well. We know that teams are better, that businesses are better, and that decisions are better when we have diverse backgrounds and diverse experiences at the table. So increasing diversity is only the start, but it's a very important one. It's obvious we're going to need to work harder to shine a light on uncovering things like unconscious bias, exposing prejudice wherever it occurs, and we absolutely need to promote anti-racism in how we think and speak and act. We're going to be striving to do that at the Kelley School. We've been doing a lot on that realm, but we're going to be striving even more in the future as we work toward bringing together events like this that will help our educational mission. I especially want to thank Meredith Harper for joining us today and being willing to share her unique journey, which has led to her current position of Vice President and Global Chief Information Security Officer for Eli Lilly and Company. I'm sure she has faced many challenges along her glass ceiling shattering path. We're also incredibly fortunate to have her share her reflections on the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I also want to make sure I thank the Center for Cybersecurity Research, particularly the Kelley faculty member, Scott Shackelford, for hosting this important event, and all of those affiliated with it. I know Von Welch is also very passionate and involved in this. For those attending, I know you'll find this session worthwhile, and I hope you continue to seek diverse voices and learn how others' experiences can influence business for the better. So thank you for participating. I'll turn it back over to Scott now.
Thank you so much, Eli, for those wonderful words. We really, really appreciate it. And without further ado, Meredith, I'll properly introduce you if that's okay. And then we'll turn over to some opening remarks before a discussion to follow, which I'm sure is going to be wide-ranging and impactful and frankly, timely. So Meredith, as Eli pointed out, is currently the Vice President and CISO for Eli Lilly, having joined the company many years ago. But in her current role, she oversees quite a wide-ranging set of activities, which she'll be talking to us about today. She's had 26 years of experience in this space and has emerged as a strategic leader who's not just interested in processes and goals and objectives, but most of all is passionate about, as she calls it, her greatest assets, her human capital. And her success has been attributed in no small part to her ability to manage large-scale, complex problems that cross functional areas while advancing the skill sets of her team members. Meredith is an active member of the Healthcare Compliance Association and the International Association for Privacy Professionals. She's also certified as a healthcare information security and privacy practitioner. She is passionate in particular about empowering women and minorities to embark upon careers in tech, especially in information security, where those populations, as we can all attest, unfortunately, are not nearly well represented enough. She also serves as on several boards in support of this passion and has a unique perspective that she enjoys sharing with others, including, we're very lucky, with us today. She's also served, lastly, her community for 29 years now through her Diamond Life membership in the Delta Sigma Theta sorority. So Meredith, thank you so very much for joining us. We'd welcome any introductory remarks you might have. And then to the rest of the audience, I do have a few questions to help get the discussion going. But from there, we would love to have your questions so you can start thinking about those. And we'll start peppering those in and calling on folks shortly. So Meredith, thank you again, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Scott. I appreciate that. I think the first thing I probably need to do is update my bio, because I think it's a couple years old at this point, where some of the history of my career has been incorporated into that. So I started in this industry, truthfully, about 28 years ago. And that was one of my first roles coming out of college, working as a computer programmer. We were programming at the time in COBOL. I know probably some of the old school folks remember COBOL, but I'm sure we're no longer leveraging that. And was able to really embark upon a career that has culminated into what I do today here at Lilly. The interesting part is, though, when I walked into my first job, what I would consider to be my first real job out of college, I was hard pressed to find people who looked like me, hard pressed to see women in the space. None of that was normalized in the early 90s. The challenge that I feel at times is that we're now in 2021 and we're still not seeing the normalization of women and minorities in these spaces. So I've started to challenge myself, my colleagues, those that I engage with over the last several years to say, why is that? Why are we almost 30 years beyond this conversation? And I'm sure the conversation was happening before I got into the industry, but we're beyond this conversation and we're still talking about the same things with not much movement. Some movement, but not very dramatic movement. So I have embraced that as a part of my brand, have embraced that as a part of my mantra as I start to think about what the next level of my career is going to look like, which quite honestly, it will be retirement. But what do I do in the meantime to replicate myself in the industry? And the more I talk about the lack of diversity, equity, and inclusion, helps us to come face to face with the things that we have not honestly talked about as an industry. And even though we've talked about it, we haven't really solutioned it the way that we probably should have. So that's been kind of a part of my goals there. I've been with Lilly for 2.5 years. I came on board as their senior director and their deputy chief information security officer, and did about a 7-month transition into the VP role and the CISO role. Prior to that, I was at Henry Ford Health System out of Detroit, Michigan for 16 years as their chief privacy officer, as well as their chief information security officer. So I got a unique opportunity to play on both sides of the house, leading those efforts for a major health system out of Detroit. I've always been in healthcare IT. Healthcare IT is my thing. I've tried to think about other industries, but I think, as you alluded to in the introduction, it's the one thing that really drives me to stay close to the healthcare arena is the focus on people, and not just the people who work for us, but the ability for us to do the great work that we do to care for patients that are at the end of what we deliver. So because those patients matter, that's what gets us up every day to do this work and to deal with the challenges that come along with that, because people at the core of it is really what's driving it for me. So we can jump right into the questions and things of that nature and get the conversation started.
Excellent. No, thank you so much, Meredith.
Mhm.
And for those especially who joined in the last few minutes, just as a reminder, I have a few questions here to get us going, but I would love to start hearing from you, as I'm sure with Meredith. So you can start thinking about either using the chat function or raising hands, and we'll figure it out from there. Okay. But just kind of an easy one to get us going. Easy, maybe, Meredith.
We'll
But
see.
yeah, right. No, I was wondering if you could think of just a couple of examples or instances over your long career in which having a diverse background of life experiences and skills was really vital to addressing a cybersecurity issue that you were faced with, right? So that it wasn't just an echo chamber of people coming at this from the same vantage point.
So I don't know if it's been, focused directly in the cyberspace, which I think I shared this with one of the professors yesterday. Most of us who actually work in information security hate the word cyber. We just don't look at it that way because what we do is much bigger than just the cyber component of our jobs. So if I think about the development of information security and assurance programs over the years, I have had the luxury of having an amazing leadership team that works well together. But in my previous role, I had two individuals that were female, two individuals that were male. These were all the directors that reported to me. And sometimes I would love to just sit back and watch when I would throw a challenge on the table or question on the table or something we were trying to solve as we were building this enterprise program. And the angle at which each group came at the problem was very different. And I can say for my male team members and my leaders, they were really focused on, okay, Meredith said these things to us, here's how we solve this problem. And they're gonna look at the problem itself. When I look at my female leaders, they were not only trying to figure out how to solve the problem, but they were trying to figure out what is the broader implications of what we're putting in place. Doesn't mean that any angle was wrong, but the value, once I pointed it out to them, I said, do you all realize that you're looking at the same problem, you're coming at it from two different angles, both angles make perfect sense. How do you marry that together and make sure that we're solutioning with our skill sets coming together? So what I found is my team started to really take off when it came to looking at broad range programs that we need to work on and to build. And then how do we look at the detail, the intricacies of how to get those pieces done as we're setting up services and policies and procedures and security things that we're pushing out, training, awareness, all of that. So I love to keep throwing things on the table for them and saying, okay, listen, you guys are going to come at it differently, and that's fine. But in the end, we're going to have this more, I would say, mature solution, more mature service, because we are looking at all the angles. We're not just trying to solve one piece of it. So that's just one instance where I've noticed that the ability for us to have diversity across gender caused us to look at things differently, but we came to these awesome and amazing solutions because of that. When it comes to other examples of that, is when I'm thinking about some of the technical components that we've had to put in place. And I think, again, based off of experience levels. So this isn't gender focused. This is diversity as it relates to levels of experience. So I may have an early career professional who has just graduated from college and they're now working for us. And I may have someone who's been in the industry for 20 years. And the ability for them to come together and have conversations and leverage the experienced individual, but also the innovation was coming from my early career professionals. So as we were looking and targeting some of the things that we wanted to do, whether it's related to automation, whether it's related to looking at emerging technologies like AI and ML, I was getting a lot of that from my ECPs. So in that instance, we were able to look at the diversity across experiences. The experienced person understood the culture of the organization. They understood how to drive implementation of enterprise programs and things of that nature. And then I had the ECP that was bringing like, well, what about this level of technology? How about we think about this? So to pull those two groups together and let them feed off of each other has allowed us to drive innovation in our spaces quicker than we probably would have done if I had just a team of experienced individuals who are comfortable with the way that we have developed and the way that we have leveraged the technology that we're aware of, and not really open ourselves up to the emerging technologies that really came from my younger folks. So those are other examples of how the diversity, again, doesn't have to necessarily just be race. And I think a lot of times we think only in two dimensions. We think that it's a race diversity mix or there's a female male gender diversity mix, but diversity is much bigger than that. Diversity is looking at your socialization, the way that you grew up plays into who you are when you come to work, and that's how you make decisions and engage with people. So that's a part of diversity. How do we bring those different experiences to the table? Work experience, the leaders versus folks who haven't led yet, that's a diversity mix. So I think we have to think a little bit more broader when it comes to that, and then see how we can create that and bring that to the table so our solutioning can be more robust.
Mm-hmm. I knew it was going to be easy.
Okay, sorry.
That was wonderful, though. And a lot of questions are coming in already, and one of which Brad posed for us up there was related to one I had for you as well. So maybe we'll just take both together. And Brad, feel free to weigh in on this. But Brad was asking about what more universities like IU should be doing to help encourage, to support, to even incentivize students, including from diverse backgrounds, to get into cybersecurity, since it's such a dire need, right? And for that matter, community colleges. So would welcome your thoughts along those lines, Meredith. If there's more particular programs you're aware of that maybe we're not taking full advantage of, or just more partnerships that need to happen, even more mentoring, right? So would welcome your thoughts.
I had such an amazing conversation yesterday. We were having this very same discussion around what can we do more to be able to fill that pipeline. I think that we have to be provocative in our perspectives. I think we have to be bold in what we choose to do, and it cannot be traditional. So we all understand the definition of insanity. We're going to keep doing the same thing over and over again. We're expecting something different. We're not going to get anything different. So when we look at the way that we actually encourage students, especially when we're starting to think about their college experiences and things of that nature, we target a lot at the high school level. We put all of our energy into that. But what my experience has been is exposure and access matter, and they matter more so when the child is younger versus when they have made it all the way to high school. So if we haven't really tapped them by the time they're like 5th grade or so, or 6th grade or so, 9 times out of 10, we're not going to be able to really pull that student in and get them really interested in this. So how do we, as a university, just looking from a university lens, how do we partner with organizations that probably do have programming that's targeted towards, say, the middle schooler, where they're exposing them to things that are STEM related? So I'm not going to say just cyber, but STEM related. Like, how do we connect ourselves with those programs? So as we are dealing with those children during those programming, we'll start to create that relationship, and the relationship now happens in high school. And then they'll say, well, hey, I've been having this relationship support from IU, and they're coming here and they're helping us with this program. And now I'm trying to choose a college. I've had this relationship since I was in the 6th grade. I think I'm going to choose IU to go, So I think that we have to be a little bit more, robust in the way that we think about those things. One of the other things that I brought up yesterday, and honestly, I had never thought about it until I was having this conversation yesterday, is that I have heard throughout my career where we just can't find women because we don't know where they are, or we just can't find minorities that we don't know where they are. And the question I always ask is, where in the heck are you looking? Because I can probably tell you like 5 places off the top of my head where you can find an abundance of women that are technical, 5 places off the top of my head where you can find minorities that are technical. So it depends on where you're looking. So one of the things that I shared with in one of the meetings yesterday was, I look at Black churches. So just use that as an example. So we have predominantly African-American churches. I'm looking in the Indianapolis area, fairly large churches that have thousands of members that go to these churches. That's where our community congregates. So when you look at the makeup of those congregants, 60% of them or so may be women. What do women do when they go to church? They take their children to church with them. So if you want to now have access to a group of individuals, I'm not going to call them a captive audience, but they're there, they're at the church. I'm a preacher's kid, so I get it. So from that perspective, they're at the church. So how do we partner with churches to say, here's what the exposure we want to give to these students. Do you have any after school programs, tutoring programs? Do you have any youth programs where we can now play a role of providing exposure to these kids who some of these youth departments may have 300, 400, 500 kids that are a part of this experience. So have universities or anyone ever thought about that? I hadn't even thought about it till yesterday, but I'm like, that is a group and a pool of individuals that we could probably tap that we never even thought about. When I think about Black Greek letter organizations, so we talked a little bit about my service and my sorority, which this year marks my 30th year of being a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And after we graduate, we still participate with our sororities. Every single Black Greek letter organization has a youth arm, every single one. So if you wanted to get to the high schoolers, you wanted to get to the middle schoolers, going through that established relationship can actually give you access to students that you probably wouldn't even get maybe through the school system. So think broader than just we have to partner with the high schools. Think broader than we have to just make sure that we're connecting in these educational environments, because you may have to connect in a different way. Think about organizations like Grace Hopper, or think about organizations like BDPA or ITSMF, where they're focused on minority talent and folks like they're developing themselves. Those are all feeders for us. We use those at Lilly. So when we start to look at how do we bring in diverse candidates, I'm going to all of those separate groups to say, here's what we're looking for. Let me see what you have. I'm going to where the talent is. I'm not asking for the talent to come to me, because they probably won't, especially if they can't see themselves represented in those spaces. They're not going to come where they can't see themselves. So that's another piece, a whole nother conversation, actually. So hopefully I answered the question.
Meredith, if I could follow up on that, on your
Sure.
comments. I think those are so many good ideas at front of pipeline. I'm kind of mindful that women's and girls soccer in the United States didn't rise to prominence because we only started with 21-year-olds.
Yes.
It started a long time ago and built that journey. But could you offer a few comments also for career switchers? We know this decade with robotic process automation, et cetera, lots of jobs are going to be displaced in organizations right now. Someone who already has a degree or maybe not and has been working in an organization, really good domain skills. How might we really begin to further incentivize career switchers from a diverse background to take a look at coming over to cybersecurity?
Yeah. So the interesting part is there are a couple of community organizations that I'm even aware of that target just that population that you're talking about. So I am originally from Detroit, Michigan. And so when I think about even what we had in that market, there was a group called Sisters Code. And it was an interesting group because, and I sponsored the group through my previous employer, but they targeted women between the ages of 25 and 85. And yes, I said 85 because we did have an 85-year-old woman who wanted to learn how to code. But really, they targeted those who were either emerging and having an interest in technology as a second career, or they were moving from one industry to the next and they wanted to learn about this whole opportunity from a STEM perspective. And so they ran, and still do to this day, ran and run training camps basically to teach the skills that can actually transfer into the industry if you didn't have them, or enhance the skills that you have to make you marketable if you're choosing to go into the industry after you have completed or walked away from another career. So if there are any community organizations that focus on that population, then that's where you want to partner. You want to partner with them to say, now, how do we become, again, a receiver of the folks that are coming out of those programs to give them opportunities as well. I think that also the other part is when you're looking at those that are switching careers, they may have, 60% of what you're looking for. We have to get to the point where we start giving people a chance. And I think that that's what we've been challenged with from a diversity perspective. There are certain demographics we have no problem giving a chance to, even if they don't have all the skills. But I've watched people sit in rooms and have conversations about minority candidates and women and try to talk themselves out of giving them the chances that we would give to a mainstream person trying to get into that role. And now I'm asking the question, why is that? Like, why are you worried about what she's going to do with her kid and how she's going to provide childcare? And we don't want to give her this leadership role because that's going to impact her being a mother. Why are you caring about that? That is her job to figure that out. You have to be able to open up the door. You have to be able to give that person a chance. So when you start to think about career switchers, it's the same thing. They may not have everything you need, but do they have enough where you can say, you know what, I'm going to take a chance on them and I'm going to give them this opportunity. And then I'm going to put a developmental plan in place to ensure that they continue to grow their skills so they can be competitive in the market and we can retain them. But sometimes they're not going to have everything, but we as employers can't close that door. And I've watched it happen. It's a sad commentary for me.
Thank you. Thank you, Meredith. And thank you, Brad. These are such fantastic points. I think you're seeing lots of people taking notes, including myself, because I'm already getting a lot of wonderful ideas out of this conversation. One of my favorite partnerships, Meredith, we did this program with Annie Cannons, which is a nonprofit in the Bay Area that helps survivors of domestic violence launch new careers in tech. And it was just the most fulfilling thing. So I think the more opportunities to do that kind of thing that you're describing, and to do those summer camps. Vaughn, I'm remembering the CACR cybersecurity summer camp targeting middle schoolers that we've done here locally with Wonder Lab, but being able to scale that up, maybe even loop in the regional campuses across IU. I think there's a lot of opportunities there. So thank you.
The interesting part is when I was in Michigan, I was a part of a group called the Michigan Council of Women in Technology. So it was about 1,000 women across the state. Again, not a lot of diversity within that, but women. I'm just glad to see some women. But what we did is we chose to put our programming at the level where we think we needed to capture the interests of young girls. So we didn't focus a ton on college students. We didn't focus a ton on high school students. We put all of our energy at the elementary and the middle school level. And the reason why we did that is because we did a study over about a 5-year period to try to understand why we were not seeing more girls select either STEM curriculums in high school or go into STEM fields in their college age. And when we gathered all of that data and took a look at it, what we found is that for the average young girl, if we did not expose that young girl to something STEM related before she hits the 5th grade, she will never select a STEM career. So we realized then we're too late in the cycle to get to them. So we have to now push ourselves earlier in the cycle. We'll let other organizations pick up with the high schoolers and the college students, but we need to get these young girls before they ever get there, because if we don't get to them, they will never choose to move into a STEM career, which I think is exacerbated the problem, to be honest.
I'll have a 3rd grader this fall. It might be time for a cybersecurity club at the
Yes.
school. I
Yes.
like it.
Yes.
I'll go back to a few more of my questions, but I want to make sure we're responsive to the group as well. So maybe Espen, we'll turn to your question next. And feel free to elaborate on what you wrote in the chat box. But Meredith, just to kind of pair it briefly, Espen was asking about what strategies you recommend for retention of diverse students that we think might be, that we're able to successfully recruit. And do you think retention is actually, the bigger challenge of those two rather than attracting them in the first place?
You are spot on. We really don't have what I would consider to be a widespread problem for retention. So I'm just thinking in terms of what we do in corporate America. So let's think about it from that context. I don't think actually attracting and recruiting is the problem. I think it's retention that's the problem long term, because again, the way that we have wrapped sponsorship, access, and support around other demographics, we don't traditionally do that for women and minorities. So for example, I am now new into my career. I got this wonderful job. I'm trying to, move and leverage this company to be able to realize my dreams here, but I don't have a sponsor. And so I don't have someone who's advocating for me in spaces that I don't have access to. They're not making sure that I am developing myself appropriately so I can continuously stay competitive. They're not recommending me to be a part of developmental programs at my company so I can continue to enhance my skills. Like that level of sponsorship and support is not always given to women. It's not always given to minorities. And just to be flat out frank, it's mostly wrapped around white males that are in the industry. And that's what we've seen. At least what I've seen for the last 30 years. So what I've tried to share with people is affinity matters. So if you are bringing diverse populations into your organization, you just can't think about getting them in. You have to think about how to keep them. Affinity matters. So if there's an ability for you to create affinity groups, whether it's through ERGs, whether it's through individual groups that you create within your own areas that are not necessarily sponsored as an ERG, but giving them community is what helps, because you got questions. You know, I came into Lilly, I wasn't a long-term Lilly person. I needed a Lilly community to help me to understand Lilly, you know, so give me some of the other new people or people who have been at Lilly for a little bit of time and they just went through this journey. Give me access to those folks so they can kind of help me do the same thing. So that's one thing. I think the other strategy that we have to walk away from a little bit is this whole idea that mentoring is going to help with retention. Mentoring does not help retention, okay? Access and sponsorship helps retention. We have been mentoring women, we have been mentoring minorities for the entire 30 years that I've been doing this work. And that has not increased access to roles, that has not increased sponsorship in the ways that we need it in order for people to continue to rise up the ladder in those careers. So what I'm sharing with groups and what I've said even at Lilly is that mentoring is great. I'm not saying people shouldn't have mentors, but that cannot be the solution to what is going to continue to break glass ceilings for folks to be able to move up the chain and really have the success that they want. Sponsorship, sponsorship, sponsorship. I cannot say that anymore. Mentoring is great, but sponsorship is what matters.
Well, thank you very much, Meredith. What I wanted to just add for a second and let others ask other questions. Oftentimes this question comes up of if, and you alluded to this by saying, you know, people would like to see somebody like them in a successful position, and that shows, that acts for them as a role model, that it kind of shows their route to access, that it is possible, it is doable. Look at Meredith. Meredith has this great job. I can be the next Meredith. I can be the next person in Lilly.
Correct.
Yeah, but in terms of what is your experience, have you seen negative sides of having the diverse groups almost always in their own groups as their support? Like if you put women with women all the time, if you put African Americans with African Americans all the time, the peers, I mean, less so than the role models, is it more negative or more positive? Have you had experience with that?
I haven't had experience as it relates to the negative side of it. Again, I don't think it's a one size fits all, nor do I think it's just one solution. That's just one example. Affinity matters. I think that's just one dimension of it. One of the great things that I think that we've done at Lilly, we've done reverse mentoring, as we called it. So we would pair men and women together, and sometimes at different levels. So we would pair a vice president with a manager. And so now we got the cross section in the diversity of the levels. We got the diversity of sometimes race, and then sometimes all the times gender. So I think it's just one dimension of it all. I haven't seen a negative perspective there. Because again, community matters, but it has to be also coupled with other things. Now, I'm going to say this. When I walked, like I said, when I walked into the industry, there was no one who looked like me. Honestly, I was the second African-American that this company had ever hired. So this is the early 90s, and we're saying the first, even in the early 90s, but it's the 2021, and we're still saying the first, which is still appalling to me, but it's what it is. But I didn't have anyone that I could look at, whether it was a man, a woman, because there were really no women. Actually, I think it was like 4 women in the whole IT department. I was the second African-American, and the other African-American was not in the IT department. She worked in a whole nother group. But we were the only 2 Black people in the whole company. And so in our experience, we had to push forward regardless of whether we had affinity. We created affinity with each other because we met each other. But whether we had large scale support of affinity groups, we didn't have that, but we allowed ourselves to create what we could with what we had, and we moved forward with that. But again, never saw any negative implications. It's an interesting concept, but I've never saw any negative implications from that, of that affinity being there. One of the things that I have shared also is that even in my recruitment, when they recruited me to come to Lilly and asked me to join their team, there was something that I was paying attention to as I was being interviewed. And had I not seen the level of diversity at the leadership level, I probably would not have made a decision to come to Lilly. That's how important it was for me. So if I didn't see women that were vice presidents or higher walk in that room to interview me, then I would have to question, do we really support women in leadership journeys? If I didn't see a minority walk in that room from a race perspective, I would have had a challenge of saying, you know what, do they really sponsor, minorities in these spaces. Luckily, I saw all of those things, which is why I'm here. But I was looking for those very same things when I was coming into Lilly, because I did not want to enter into a company that did not offer me what I knew I needed in order for me to be successful. So hopefully that answers your question.
Oh, it does. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Espen. Thank you, Meredith. And we're turning to Vaughn next, and then the order just for the queue is Jean, Stephen, and Carrie.
All right.
Meredith, first, let me echo the thank yous for coming and join us here today. This has already been a fascinating conversation, and I wanted to ask for your perspective on something specifically around cybersecurity and race, which is, since the murder of George Floyd last summer, there's been a lot of introspection and use of language in cybersecurity. And I'm specifically talking about our systemic use of things like whitelist, blacklist, white hat, black hat.
Yes.
And I've heard this described as everything from sort of theater to incredibly value for inclusivity. And I would love your perspective on this matter.
I am so excited that you asked that question. And the reason why I'm excited is because my answer to it is going to be an interesting one. And it was one I was very proud of. So as you stated, when things took a turn for where it went last year, we started to open up and have what I would consider to be honest conversations around race, inequality, racism, and all of that, in a way that I have never seen those kind of conversations in corporate America. We knew that these things were happening on the peripheral outside of our professional environments, but we never had those conversations collectively as a team. And so the way that we embraced those at Lilly was quite phenomenal. Our leader, Dave Ricks, is a proponent of us making sure we're having the right conversations, the more transparent conversations, to be able to talk about these things without any fear or concerns or whatever the case is. And we did a lot of that last year. But to answer your question around some of the language that we've used in technology for years, so whether it's whitelisting or blacklisting, or whether it's slave master or whatever those terminologies that we've leveraged, I have always had concerns and problems with it, but I knew I couldn't drive the industry to change the way that we have crafted these terms. So when I looked at, I didn't look at this specifically for our organization, but I got a message one day from my security architecture team that's made up of all white males. And they came to me and said, we wanted to meet with you. And I said, okay, well, let's meet. And they came in and they said, we've been talking as a group, and what we want to do is we want to change the terminology that we've been leveraging for years in the industry, but we want to change that for Lilly. We may not be able to change it for the industry. We want to change it for Lilly. And so they put this proposal on the table to do exactly what you just said. So we went from whitelisting and blacklisting to allow list and deny list. Easy change. And started to communicate that to our partners and our customers across Lilly to say, here's how our processes are going to change. Here's the terminology you're going to hear from us. And here's why we're doing it. We feel that it sets a precedent that all things considered Black are not bad. And that's the way we've termed a lot of these things. And so I was so incredibly proud of that team. And the reason why I was proud of them is because they decided to do this on their own. In the goodness of the greater good, or the intent of the greater good of what we were trying to achieve at Lilly, and even for the industry, without me saying as their Black leader that you guys need to take a look at this. I never mentioned it. They did this on their own. So I think that organizations have to decide how they want to address this and how these terms land on people, and how they have landed on people throughout the years. Now, will we ever make a shift industry-wide? I think we can. But I think it's going to take us to make the decision that we no longer will leverage those terms in the industry, and then the rest of the industry will come along. But we have to decide as a member of the industry that that's no longer acceptable for us, and be quite vocal about why it's not acceptable for us. We all are a part of these industry groups, whether it's the HISAC or the CISO Coalition or the NTSC or whatever organizations we're a part of. How are we bringing those messages into those industry groups to talk about what we're doing in our spaces to transform the way that we talk and the way that we think about these things? So I have shared. I sit on the board of the National Health ISAC. So I have shared with them, here's what we're doing. And this is what we've chosen to do at Lilly to be able to make this a more comfortable space for our team members. You guys might want to consider to do the same things.
That's a powerful example. Step by step, it can make a difference.
It can.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
thank you so much.
Thank you. And I think Jean was next.
Yeah, so I am thrilled at the new commitment and concern about diversity I'm hearing among IU's leadership. You have really made a difference because these are conversations that I've never heard. And among this leadership that's present here, it's great to know that there is an awareness of this now. The thing I wanted to shout out about was storytelling and also reaching to younger people. We're testing a platform for the Boys and Girls Club that if you have community outreach, I would love to share with you. And one of the fundamental things is it's not just about protecting yourself and using capture the flag. It is also grounded in concepts of computer security as caregiving and computer security as curiosity. We have capture the flag, free the cat, and find the creature, which is about looking for an alien. And we are trying to reach that, 4th to 7th grade window. And one of the ways we talk about computer security is, is conflict and defeat. We're very much about capturing that flag and penetration testing and, taking the noobs. But it could equally be about protecting vulnerable assets and empowering your community. And that's a kind of a larger language question than specific language is the larger scale framing. So I really want to have an opportunity to share that with you. And I was teaching last week and I'm reading a textbook. I'm trying to read these textbooks. This is a textbook that was written 3 years ago, and they're still using Chinese remainder theorem instead of, the proper name of the theorem.
Yes. So listen, Scott has full access.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, Scott has full access to me. If you want to connect with Scott on the back end, we can have some more conversations. I'm more than open and happy to do that. I think it's great that you guys are leveraging the Boys and Girls Club. That's a great place to go get the talent and go get the folks, the kids and all of that and give them exposure. So thank you for sharing.
We're excited about it.
You should be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Stephen had a really good question, I thought, as well. And Stephen, please feel free to elaborate on this. Stephen Reynolds from Ice Miller, I'm sure.
Meredith, good to see you again.
Hello, Stephen.
We just met like a week or so ago.
Oh, is that right? Awesome. Oh, that's perfect. And great question, I thought, Stephen. So feel free to elaborate on that. It was related to, how you get that first gig, if the first gig requires experience, right?
Yeah. Do you want to restate it, or is that the question?
No,
right?
I can elaborate a little bit
Please
more.
do.
So I'm sure you get requests from people who are recent law grads or just switched careers, and they ask, how do I break into getting my first job? And they say, there's lots of job postings, but everyone I see says 3 to 5 years experience. And I just got out and I don't see any with 0 experience. And there have been studies, I think this affects minorities and women disproportionately, because there's been studies that we are least likely to apply for a job that we don't meet the qualifications as written, whereas people in the majority will apply for jobs even if they don't meet the written qualifications. So I think a lot of people are just discouraged from ever applying. And so my question is, what advice would you give to those people who are entry-level job applicants without, with not the 3 to 5 year experience? Yeah.
Apply anyway. So that's the first thing. You are absolutely correct in terms of what we see minorities and women typically doing. If there's 10 requirements, we are, I guess, more critical of ourselves in terms of, I don't meet all 10, so I'm not going to apply at all. You might have 6 of the 10. And so why not you just apply? They may choose to take a chance on you. So just apply anyway, if you think that this is a role where you have the majority of the skills that are being asked to be had. The other part is, I think that we cannot underestimate internships. And I think the companies like Lilly and others we have a very robust internship program here at Lilly. We recruit from about 40 different universities. 4 or 5 of those universities are HBCUs. So if we're looking at minority talent, we're getting them from there as well. We're going to conferences and things of that nature. So I'm just thinking that you have to be able to leverage those internships to give you access to these companies. When I think about the folks that we're bringing into information security now from my team, we're bringing them in because they've interned for me for the last 2 years. And so now, even though they might not have what I would consider to be this postgraduate experience, they do have 2 years or 2 summers of Lilly experience where they were interns. They got exposed to our teams, our support, what we do, our services, incident response, whatever we're doing. They've been exposed to that. So I will take that over sometimes the degree, because I know that they have been committed to us for the last couple of years. So we cannot underestimate the internships. I think we got to encourage our young people to participate in those if they are available to them. Most larger companies have them. That is a great way to get your foot in the door, because we do lean towards our interns when it comes to our early career professionals and who we're hiring. But apply anyway. The boldness that we have to continue to have or start to have, we have to step up our game. It's kind of what I said earlier, definition of insanity. We've been doing it this way for all this time. It's not working for us. So if we feel that we need to be bold in our pursuit and we say that I'm going to go ahead and apply for that role, you never know. They might say, you know what, you're going to be great. We're going to develop you. Here's what we're willing to offer you. But they won't even be able to have that conversation if you're fearful of actually submitting your application. So I just think that we have to leverage and exercise some boldness in that.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you.
No, thank you, Stephen. That was great. And then I thought, Carrie, if you'd like to restate, please feel free, but I'll just kind of paraphrase Carrie's question for you, Meredith. And she had a good question about in your study in particular. Did you find that girls and minorities may have erroneous perceptions of STEM? And she says that I think many girls and women think that IT and information security is all for techies and coders, and translates to cubicle life, people in hoodies, those common refrains. And she says, I feel that we, this field, is missing conveying the message that IT needs problem solvers, creative types, individuals. We haven't talked about it as from a helping profession for the 21st century. So I'm wondering, have you come across that same erroneous perception that Carrie is referring to there?
We suck at marketing.
Yes.
Right. So can I just say that we suck at it, and so this has been my experience. So we suck at it. I have always been in health IT. So even though other industries have been an interest of mine over time, I've always stayed in the healthcare space, but in an IT type realm. And I remember doing career days at the beginning and the middle of my career. And I would go to these high schools and I would talk to these students about what I did. And so I would talk to them about all of that, and just using healthcare as an example. And I would tell them I work in healthcare. Well, are you a doctor? And I'm like, no. And well, are you a nurse? Well, no. And so they're like going down the list of like all of these clinical jobs, because they had no concept of the fact that I could actually be doing something else in the healthcare space other than something clinical. So by the time we got down the list of 4 or 5 things, they're like, well, then what do you do? And I'm like, I'm a technologist. And they were like, technologist? Like, that's even an option? So they didn't even know it was an option to them. And I think we've done the same thing when it comes to cyber. When it's come to technical careers, we have pushed just one narrative around the opportunities. So let me say this. There are some times when I'm thinking about how I've built teams over the years. When I was at Henry Ford Health System, I basically was asked to build a function that was non-existent. Meredith, we need a privacy program. We're not going to really give you any resources. Let's figure out how you can pull from internal staff. We're going to give you a small budget and make it happen. So when I started to look at individuals that I wanted to bring into the team, these folks didn't have privacy backgrounds, because it wasn't a discipline that we had that was formed enough for them to even have privacy backgrounds. So I realized walking in the door, I was going to have to teach them privacy. So what other skills are they coming to the table with that's going to be important for us in this program? For example, we have training and awareness that we have to create. Training and awareness cannot be created from a technical perspective when you're trying to get the users to perform differently. It has to be translated in language that they can understand. So I went after folks who had English degrees. I went after folks that were non-technical because I wanted to be able to explain a technical concept to them. And then they tell me, okay, Meredith, all of that you just said, the average person is not going to understand that. Here's what the real language is that the user will understand. So in that instance, I'm leveraging a skill set that in some instances, people didn't even know we needed in this space because all we talk about is the technical side of it. We don't talk about those pieces. When I start to think about behavioral analytics, and as we get more engaged in embracing that, is it important for me to maybe have someone with a psychology background? Probably, because they're going to help us from behavioral analytics perspective. Do I need someone who has an analytics background, not necessarily security, but analytics? So I'm saying we haven't really shown people the gradation and the different granularities that are there for different skill sets that you can bring into this career. Again, we make everybody think they have to have the hoodie. You know, they're tapping away at their keyboard, but we don't talk about these other areas that totally align from a security perspective that we would be looking for as well. We just suck at the marketing of it. We got to do better.
Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing that, because I've been in IT as long as you have just about, and I have two college girls who are freshmen and juniors, and despite growing up with me being technical, they feel like the coding word is a barrier for entry.
Yes. So I agree with you. I have a goddaughter right now who goes to Grand Valley State University, and for all her life, she's known that I've been a technologist. I'm the godmother with the technology background. I'm the paranoid one, so I'm monitoring phones and I'm doing all kinds of stuff. And she didn't want to have anything to do with it because she had this idea that I don't want to sit behind a computer and just code all day and do that, because that's not going to be exciting to me. And so she's now in her second year at Grand Valley, and she had to declare a major. And she called me one day and said, okay, I want to talk about this with you because someone told me that I could do these other things as it relates to technology that I didn't even know that I could do. Is that true? And so we finally got a chance to have a conversation about the opportunities there. And she selected information security as her background and her curriculum. And I was so excited. But had it not been for someone saying to her, here's the possibilities, she probably would have steered her way away from that because she didn't want to sit behind the desk and do the coding. And I was the same way. I mean, even though coding is how most of us got into the industry, it was not something that was great for me because I think a little bit differently than just a coder, and I wanted to do more than that. So I get it. I totally get it. But we just got to get better at the marketing. It's terrible.
Could not agree more. Thank you, Carrie. That was excellent. And just one more question for me as well, Meredith, and I think it's an important maybe intersection that we haven't explored yet during this discussion. And it was Camille Stewart wrote this really great piece for the Council on Foreign Relations, and she made the case that systemic racism is a cybersecurity threat, full stop. Right. And in her piece, which I'll put a link to in the chat box in just a moment, she points to some critical topics like the spread of disinformation that capitalizes on the prevalent racial tensions that we're all too familiar with in the US, and it exacerbates these divides. And it makes it harder, frankly, for us to solve a lot of these challenges that we're facing, right? So I'm just wondering if you'd care to kind of reflect on Camille's take here, and just playing devil's advocate, do you think, coupling these really challenging cybersecurity threats that we're all talking about facing in this series, along with these, the need to address systemic racism, does that make both challenges, frankly, all the more difficult?
It was a very interesting piece. I mean, it really was a very interesting piece and a very interesting take. And there was part of me that totally understood her argument and really aligned with what she was sharing and what she was conveying. Here's where I had the challenge, though. This is the side of me that was like, I don't know if coupling these things together is something that we would ever want to do. Because what I don't want to also happen is us to take the focus off of the underlying problem, because I think one is a symptom and one is the underlying core issue. And so I think we have to focus on the underlying core issue, which in my mind would be the institutions of racism that we've built in this country. And we have to be honest about that. This is not a declaration of anybody currently, you know, walking around and someone saying that you need to be damned to hell or something. That's not what we're saying. But what we're saying is that institutions that have been created in this country have been rooted in some instances in racism. So we have to fix that. And if we fix the core problem, then it's easier for us to be able to do the work that we're doing from a cyber perspective. And some of the tropes and the norms and the things that we typically see in these spaces, we no longer will embrace those things when disinformation campaigns are happening and things of that nature. It takes our focus off of what we really need to be focused on. So there was part of me that got it. And there was part of me that was like, oh, I don't know if I want to create these equal. I don't know if I want to combine them together. I think we have to focus on it and be really intentional around it. And what you're finding in the industry and even with companies, they're starting to say, no, we have to really delve deep into the psyche of how we got here and how we can stop some of what we're doing and what we've created. How do we break it down and build it back up? Because the institution in and of itself is built in racism. So I think some companies and some organizations have tried to go down that road, and I think that's where we need to go. But combining them together, I think it's just going to make it where we're not going to make progress on either if we do it that way.
That's fair.
Seemed like it was too much to do.
Right. No, that's fair. Thank you, Meredith.
But a great article. It was a great article, though.
Yeah, no, I thought so too. Yeah. And certainly if there's any other final questions from the group, we welcome those. We only have a few minutes left. So I do have one final one, which you can perhaps just use as an opportunity to offer any closing remarks you might like to as well, Meredith. And that is, you know, here in Indiana, we're a bit fortunate to have, you know, a relatively well coordinated apparatus at the state level to boost kind of all different types of cybersecurity coordination with the Indiana Executive Council that Stephen sits on. I know you've been involved with as well. And I'm wondering, you know, is that entity or doing enough, you know, for example, to boost cybersecurity initiatives, diversity initiatives in particular statewide? If not, you know, if you could get the ear of that council and of the governor, what more should we be doing? Not just in the universities, not just, you know, at the community college level, but really from the grassroots up, right? So what are some blind spots you feel like that we haven't addressed yet in our discussion over the last hour?
So as I was going through some of the documentation on that, I thought it was quite interesting that there was a few statements around talent and the lack of diversity as it relates to talent and things of that nature and what we should be focusing on from a talent perspective. But I had the sense that it didn't go deep enough for me. I think, again, if we're going to have the discussion around the lack of certain diverse candidates in the space and how do we fill the pipeline, it's one thing to tell critical infrastructure or to tell this particular organization or this line of business that they need to think about the pipeline, but how do they need to think about the pipeline? I don't think that our declarations have gone deep enough to say how you need to think about that pipeline and then give them some solutions to how they can actually tap into a greater pipeline. So, because again, if we all knew the solution to it, we would have been doing it, right? So because we don't know the solution, we can talk about the fact that we have a pipeline issue and that we need to talk about talent and all that kind of stuff. But the solutioning of where we go next, I think people might not know what they need to do next when it comes to that. So from that perspective, I think we can go a little bit deeper as it relates to the organization, the documents that have been created. I went out on the website and read a couple things, but I think we can go a little bit deeper there.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I think we had someone else in the chat. Something popped up in the chat. We may have one more question.
Oh, yeah. That was from that kind of final question that I had as well. Okay. And I'm wondering maybe, and you referred to this earlier, but maybe you could just reflect just for a minute on, you know, what more Eli Lilly in particular is doing to overcome, you know, some of these barriers. Like you said, definitely targeted outreach, moving beyond just mentoring, right? Even the reverse mentoring is really interesting. But are there any other initiatives that you'd like to highlight?
There's a ton. I mean, there's a ton of initiatives that we're doing, but I think one of the things that we do differently that maybe other companies haven't embraced yet is that we are given goals when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the makeup of my staff as a part of my performance. So if we know that we want to hit a certain percentage of team members in any particular demographic, that's shared with me as a leader. And the expectation is that we actively recruit in those spaces where we want to see movement, where we haven't seen the representation that we want to see. And again, that's part of my performance. So I don't know if companies have gone that far to say, you are responsible for the diversity makeup in your area. And if you are lacking diversity, then that's leadership. That's a leadership issue. And you need to do better in those spaces. So I think just giving us those targets is helpful. Giving us also tools. So it's the partnerships that we have with various groups that give us the ability to tap into those to help us with these diversity initiatives for recruiting and things of that nature. Lilly has a ton of partnerships that we have embarked upon. Like I said, BDPA, the Black Data Processing Association, is one that has a lot of middle and high school programs. And so we are a sponsor of BDPA. The president of BDPA is a Lilly employee. And so that's how important this is to us, to make sure that this organization continues to be a feeder for us. So I think that those relationships really help us achieve our goals as it relates to that.
Absolutely.
So if I can just say one last thing, I think we got 1 minute left. I don't think we have any other questions. But one of the things that I would want to convey is that by no means has my journey been easy, but it has been worth it. And I've said that to students, I've said it to faculty, I've said it to my colleagues, is I don't feel ever that I have the luxury to get off the stage. And the time when I can get off the stage is when women and minorities and underrepresented populations are normal for our industry. When that happens, then I can get off the stage. But until then, my job is to make sure that I'm opening up opportunities for those who will not get them normally. Giving people a chance, developing people appropriately so they can be competitive and be retained in the industry, and mostly to replicate myself so that other young Black girls, young Black boys, other minorities who typically are not in this space can one day say that I can be the CISO of Lilly as well, because one day I met this lady and she was talking about the work that she did. But by no means has this been easy. So if people want to embark upon this journey, you have to have tough skin, you have to have true grit, and you have to just move through it, because you're not going to always be accepted. You're not going to always be heard. You're not going to always be valued. But should that stop you? In my mind, I don't think so. But you got to be prepared for that walking in the door. So I say that to people because I think about this journey the same way I think about the journey of motherhood. We talk about all the beautiful things about motherhood. Like you get this wonderful little baby, they smell great and all this other kind of stuff. But we don't talk about the staying up at night and I'm tired and all these other things that go along with motherhood. We glamorize it, but we don't give the real. So I try to share the journey with people to understand that it has not been perfect, but it's been perfect for me. And it has exposed people and given people access that typically would not have that. So I'm going to give you the real version and not the glorified version of what this could look like. So thank you so much. I know we're a little bit over, but thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Meredith. And echoing Heidi, bravo. That was fantastic. Yes, please join me in thanking
You guys too. It's awesome.
Homes and businesses. That was absolutely wonderful, Meredith. Thank you. Thank you. And we hope you can join us on the next CACR speaker event, which is going to be co-hosted with the Luddy School and featuring Patrick McDaniel on April 8th. So thank you all again. And thank you, Meredith.
Thank you. You guys have a good day.
Thanks, you too. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. I'll follow up on email and send